Hey, good morning. I'm Patricia Murphy. It's Monday. This is Seattle Now. The Trump administration has quietly removed an array of floating ocean observatories from waters off Washington and Oregon. Oceanographers use these buoys to measure all sorts of things, including wave height, concentrations of oxygen and carbon dioxide.
The information from the ocean is used in so many ways, and it's so few and far between that it's really just so sad to lose these treasures.
Coming up, we'll talk with KUOW environment reporter John Ryan about what this means for scientists and the fishing industry who rely on the data. But first, let's get you caught up. Today's the day, Seattle. The city's first World Cup match kicks off at noon as Belgium takes on Egypt. This is your reminder to plan ahead. Gates open at 9 a.m., so anticipate extra traffic on the roads and extra people on transit. And remember, no bikes or scooters are allowed on light rail during FIFA match days to maximize space. Also, most of Pioneer Square and the Stadium District will close down to vehicle traffic about 4 hours before the match begins. If you want to beat the heat, FIFA says fans are allowed to bring one factory-sealed water bottle into the match. Fans of giant wooden troll statues, this one's for you. Danish artist Thomas Dambo plans to site a dozen more of the whimsical troll creatures in Western Washington, adding to the 5 already here. The Seattle Times reports some of the reclaimed wood statues will go to Pierce County, where they'll join Dambo's collection of more than 180 wooden trolls around the world. Find the original trolls in Ballard, West Seattle, Issaquah, and on Bainbridge and Vashon Island. And get your wading boots out. NOAA says there will be some super low tides today and tomorrow. If you're a first-time tide pooler or need a little extra guidance, beach naturalists from the Seattle Aquarium will be at Golden Gardens, Olympic Sculpture Park, and Seahurst Park in Burien this morning. Be careful and stay hydrated out there. Seattle is also under a heat advisory today, so don't forget the sunscreen. We're back with more headlines on tonight's episode of Seattle Now. For the last decade, sophisticated buoys have been floating in the waters off the U.S. coast. Now, the Trump administration is dismantling them. That was revealed by the New York Times earlier this month. And KUOW's John Ryan was the first to report that buoys off Washington and Oregon have already been removed. It happened last September. They were part of a National Science Foundation project to monitor surface and underwater conditions. Environment reporter John Ryan's here now to tell us more. John, thanks for your reporting. Thanks for being here.
Sure, Trish. Hi.
So first off, when did these buoys get installed and where were they?
The ones off the northwest coast have been there about a decade, and they are part of this network of observatories that's not just in the United States, but off Alaska, North Carolina, the Northwest, and even Greenland. Of those 5 regional arrays, only one of them is being spared. That's the one that's kind of anchored to the seafloor. It's on the seafloor off the Oregon coast, and it's monitoring seismic conditions off that Cascadia subduction zone, which could generate very dangerous earthquakes and tsunamis.
Okay. You write that the buoys keep the pulse of the oceans. What does that mean? What sort of data have they been collecting?
One of these buoys is just bristling with different devices and measuring all sorts of things all over the surface of it. Temperatures, currents, oxygen levels, acidity or pH, how much biological productivity there is, all sorts of different ways to keep tabs on the oceans, which are changing rapidly as humans add pollutants to them and as the climate warms up due to our pollution of the atmosphere.
Who was using this data? How was it helpful?
Well, all sorts of oceanographers, climate scientists would use it to track these big changes. And you should know that the vast majority of heat that is trapped by our planet due to our extra pollution goes into the ocean. Some of it heats up the atmosphere, but 90% goes into the ocean. So the ocean's basically doing us a giant favor by slowing down, by absorbing all this heat that could be heating up our lives, but it's just going into the ocean. So you want to understand climate change, you got to understand the oceans. And these buoys and others like them in other parts of the world are a big part of that long-term data series that helps us understand how is our planet changing.
I'm glad you brought up long-term because they have been in place for a while and continuity of data is really important.
Absolutely. They've been in there for about a decade. They have a planned life expectancy of 25 or 30 years. So they're being yanked well before they were running out of juice.
You spoke with a Washington fisherman who relied on these buoys to do his work. That's really interesting. Tell us about him.
Well, before I tell you about him, I want to give you a pop quiz, Trish.
Oh, gosh.
Okay, you ready? What is Washington State's most valuable commercial fishery?
Oh, salmon.
Good guess, but no, it's Dungeness crab.
Oh, my favorite, too.
$80 million a year hauled up, mostly off the outer coast. And I spoke to one of these Dungeness crab fishermen. His name is Joseph Viederhans, and he spends his winters crabbing out of Westport and his summers long lining for halibut in the Gulf of Alaska. And I was able to get a hold of him on his boat 10 miles offshore in the Gulf of Alaska, where he took a break from hauling up giant halibut, to tell me a bit about how dangerous his work can be, especially off the Washington coast in winters, which is when the Dungeness crab season is.
Anytime I leave Westport, I'm checking those cans. Having a very accurate picture of what weather's doing is crucial. We're in one of the most dangerous fisheries that exists. Almost every year, at least, there's boats that sink and serious injuries in this fishery. So if there's a way to kind of minimize risk, it's important to do so.
Joseph was one of the very first people beyond a very small number of researchers to figure out that these buoys, or cans, as he calls them, which I find charming, he was the one of the first to discover that they weren't working, because he was looking for this data to make sure he could be fishing safely, and there was nothing coming out of them.
And then what did he do?
There's contact information on these buoys. They're big. They stick out of the water. They have like ocean monitoring buoy. Contact this information if you find it lost. So he contacted them and he said, "What's going on? Is it broken? They've been out for a couple months. When will they be back online?" And then he found out, no, they've been yanked from the water entirely.
Wow. How has that changed how he's doing his job, or maybe in the winter how he'll do his job?
So there are other data buoys out there, but they're very kind of few and far between, spaced very widely. So he has to basically rely on reports of, say, the steepness and height of waves, but from farther away than his own fishing ground. So that puts him at a little bit more of a risk of maybe encountering dangerous conditions.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of fishermen use these buoys for safety.
For safety, and even just to figure out if it's a good time to be fishing. I spoke with a biologist for the Quinault tribe, and these buoys off the Washington coast were in kind of Quinault traditional waters, and they're a big fishing tribe. They've got a fleet of about 30 ocean-going fishing boats. And he was telling me how before these buoys were in place, they would learn if there was a low oxygen problem out there by seeing crabs wash up on the beach or show up in their pots. Well, until these were pulled out, they could figure out if there were low oxygen conditions. And if there were, they would say, we're not going to fish for crab now because we don't want to have them sitting trapped in our traps and just dying in this low oxygen area.
Really, really important information. What reasons have the Trump administration given for removing these buoys?
Mostly cost cutting is the main justification. The whole global network costs about $48 million a year to operate, hundreds of million dollars to install. So it's questionable whether it's really cost savings or not. But it is also part of a larger effort from the Trump administration to basically get the federal government out of the business of doing science or supporting science, and climate science in particular. Trump has for years called climate change a hoax, which is false. And, the head of the EPA, he has said his agency's goal is to drive a stake through the heart of the climate change religion. So there is a extreme antipathy to climate science and just a denial of the facts.
You spoke with an oceanographer at the UW about the impact of this decision. What did she tell you?
Yeah, I spoke with Jan Newton at UW. She says it's tragic and it just doesn't make sense to her. She says this data is used in so many ways for so many purposes. And with these buoys having 15 or 20 years left in their useful lives, just sees that as a big waste.
As you mentioned, there are other data collecting buoys out there that can do this work. What is the status? What does that even look like?
This National Science Foundation system of buoys off the Northwest coast, the only one that survives are these seafloor ones that are mostly about seismic activity. There are others funded by other sources like NOAA that exist. But Jan Newton, the oceanographer, was saying, it's like you're driving and they've removed half the signs from the highway. They're still useful, but there's a much better chance you will get lost or crash.
What happens next here?
Well, very immediately on Tuesday, the last of the Northwest floating data observatories is scheduled to be yanked out of the water off the Newport, Oregon coast. There were 3 off of Grace Harbor, Washington, that were removed in September. 2 of 3 off of Oregon were removed, and that last Oregon one is coming out next week. Some Democrats in Congress have said they will fight this change and try to get these buoys back in place, back gathering important scientific data. But even if they do, it could be a long time. There will probably still be a big gap in this long-term data that we were talking about. Researchers tell me it could take 6 months or a year to recalibrate and redeploy this warehoused equipment. Most of it's now sitting in a warehouse in Corvallis, by the way. And most of the people that work on these things, they've been laid off or have found other work. So a lot of that expertise might be lost.
What else should people understand about this story, John, before I let you go?
Oceans influence our lives in many ways that we don't think about, but understanding them is really important to understanding everything from our weather and climate to fish and shellfish and just the way our planet is changing.
John Ryan, KUOW environment reporter, really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening to Seattle Now. Take a moment to rate and review the show in your podcast app or share this episode with a friend. Today's episode was produced by Andy Hurst. It was edited by Caroline Chamberlain Gomez. Our production team also includes Vaughn Jones, Brooklyn Jamerson Flowers, and Paige Browning. Greg Kramer does our theme music. Seattle Now and KUOW Public Radio are members of the NPR network. I'm Patricia Murphy. Talk to you tonight for Evening Headlines.